Welcome to the Real People, Real Business Show. My name is Stephanie Hayes, and I'm a business strategist who loves to speak with like-minded entrepreneurs to share their real stories and the gritty details on building their businesses. On this show, you won't hear about the glamorized entrepreneurship journeys that you see online. You won't be told how to make six figures in 6 weeks. Instead, you can expect to hear real, vulnerable, and inspiring stories that you can relate to that have helped create the foundation for each of our guests' businesses. Goodbye, boss babes. Hello, real-life entrepreneurs. Today, I am so excited to welcome Tahnee Sanders. Tahnee is a multifaceted marketing strategist and copywriter. Since 2019, she has supported more than 100 small businesses through her strategy sessions, done-in-a-day copywriting service, and group coaching. She's also been featured on shows like If I Made a Podcast and has been a contributor for Fairfax Media and Real Weddings magazine, as well as a speaker at summits like the 2022 I can barely say that, Simply Business Summit, among others. Welcome to the show, Tahnee, and thanks so much for taking the time to share your story.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Well, we just discovered that you used to live just an hour away from where I live now. And I am so excited to know that, because most people, when I say I live in Squamish, they're like, yeah, with no idea where that is.
I know, my first reaction was, how did I not know that? It's just down the road, up the road.
Yeah, well, up, I guess.
Up the road.
Slightly up. We're still at sea level. It depends on where you're coming from in Vancouver.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And so you have had quite an adventurous career, and that led you to where you are right now. So let's dive in and fill me in, like give me the whole story.
Would love to. So I started my career as a journalist. So that's what I studied. I majored in journalism, and I was really fortunate, got a cadetship, which is almost unheard of these days. There's so few of them still around in the media landscape. And I was in newspaper. So I did my cadetship. I rapidly rose the ladder. At 26, I was the youngest editor of a daily newspaper in Australia. And in theory and on paper, I was living my best life. Like as a student, that for me was like the pinnacle. If I could be an editor of a daily paper, like what in the world? And just through a series of events, it happened. And I was 26, newly married, and I was completely and utterly burnt out. I had nothing left in the tank. And I was like, this can't be all there is. So my husband and I did a delayed honeymoon. We did what every young person does, took our backpacks, and we went through Central and South America. And about halfway through our trip, we went, not quite ready to go back to Oz, because in my mind, I was going back to media again. And I was like, I didn't quite feel refueled. And we were fortunate to be in a financial position where we didn't have children yet, and there was no one else depending on us. We're like, where could we just go and do one more year? And we settled on Vancouver. And my husband got a job, and my visa didn't come through initially. So I was just in kind of a bit of a limbo phase where I was freelancing, writing for some companies back in Australia. And I thought, I need to do something. And I was walking to this little coffee shop up the road from where we'd rented an apartment in Vancouver. And as I'd walk to the coffee shop, I'd pass this adorable little flower shop every day. And it was just like one of those, like from a movie scene, like, oh my gosh, it must just be so beautiful to work in there every day. And over a few weeks, my visa had eventually come through, but I walked home and we didn't really know anyone yet. So my husband was going to an office to work, but he'd come home and I'd be like, talk to me. Like, I haven't spoken to people all day. And he came home this one day and I said, I think I'm going to go and work in the flower shop up the road. He's like, okay, I think that's a great idea. And it was just like silence, because I had actually verbalized this thought that I'd had for quite some time. And then I had to do something about it because I'd told someone and they had validated it. I was like, oh, right. I have zero experience. I know nothing about floristry. How in the world am I going to get a job in a flower shop? And in my mind, this was for a year. It was just going to be like a career break. Then I'd head back to Australia full of energy and I'd go back to media. And anyway, I figured out that this floral shop was absolutely beautiful, but it didn't really have a strong social media presence. They had a blog, but it was inconsistent. And I could just see so much amazing opportunity for the brand. So I wrote a pitch and I cold pitched this business and said, look, I really want to learn about floristry. I will do your marketing strategy. I will manage your social media. I'll manage your blog for free if you will give me a job and teach me about flowers. And saying that out loud now, it does sound utterly ridiculous. But for some reason it worked. And the owner of that flower shop really resonated with my story. And she was like, are you kidding me? That would be incredible. And thus started honestly, it was the beginning of the next phase of my career, to be honest. So I did my floral internship, I guess, and then that kind of progressed into me being the wedding and event manager for that business. I took them through 2 rebrands over my time there. But what I think I learned was I loved the flowers, but PS, the absolute physically hardest job I have ever done. Long days. It looks glamorous. There is very little glamour in floristry. I have so much respect for anyone that works in that industry. But what I realized through that journey was I started to connect with lots of other small business owners, and particularly originally small business owners in the wedding industry. And that led me actually into working as a content strategist for a blog in the wedding industry in America called Once Wed. And that was when I really started to see that this weird set of skills that I'd started to develop from being a writer through to doing marketing for small businesses, through to understanding a really unique industry, all of a sudden those skills had a purpose working for this blog. And again, jumping forward a few more steps, the founder of that blog went on to found an online learning company and took me with her as she founded that company to be the content strategist and kind of to do all the marketing strategy of the creation and launches of a whole stack of courses for creative entrepreneurs. And this was before everyone had an online course. So this was the early days. Like, we were bootstrapping, we were making the platforms that our courses were hosted on. This is before you could just pay a monthly subscription for an online hosting platform and all those things. But that for me was like soul on fire kind of work. Like, I felt like I was being able to make a difference to all of these creative entrepreneurs through the content of all of these experts whose courses we were helping create. But as I began to sit on, honestly, over 100 webinars as part of all of these online courses, I was in the chats doing all the moderating of the comments and fielding the questions back to the expert. And I started to realize that while everybody's businesses are unique and everyone feels like no one understands what they're going through, the honest truth is we all have the same struggles. But what's challenging is we want someone to put those struggles and the answers to those struggles into contexts uniquely for our businesses. And that's when I was sitting on this webinar one day and went, I can do that. I can be the person that answers these questions, but in context. And I think online courses are amazing and there's so much you can learn from them. But where it gets challenging is you then want someone to put it into context, like, oh, I get that, but how does that work for my business? And that was kind of the light bulb moment for me that was like, I need to start my own business. And I should say at this point, we were 5 or so years into our Canadian stint. It obviously went for much longer than a year. Our first daughter was born in Canada. And I kind of went to the owner of the company I was working with and said, I have this idea. I don't know if it's going to work, but I think I should start my own business. And she's like, I think that's a fantastic idea. I think you should too. And that was the start of the strategy studio. And fast forward 3-4 years now, and I have moved back to Australia. I have 2 children, but I just absolutely couldn't imagine it any other way. It was a weird sequence of events, but if I had never walked into that flower shop and asked for that job, I never would have the business that I have today, even though my business now has very little to do with floristry.
That's how it works, right? Is we just, when we remain open to opportunities and unafraid to see what happens, that's when the most amazing things happen. And I think what I want to call out is something that you mentioned, like, we have a very saturated industry. The business education industry is extremely saturated, but what people will pay for is curation and relevance, right?
100%.
And I think that that's what you we're speaking about. So here we are today with the Strategy Studio. Tell me more about the services that you offer, who you work with, how you've kind of developed the current iteration of the business.
Yeah. So today I predominantly work with female founders of small to medium businesses. And what I like to say my zone of genius is I work with these women to help them communicate their value through their marketing and their copywriting so they can charge what their expertise is truly worth and run enjoyable, profitable businesses. And I think that communicating your value part is what we all get hung up on. We have amazing expertise and we have a really quality product or service, but we don't know how to let others know about that. And from the outside looking in, it can often be really hard to understand the value or why a price tag is attached to a certain person's product or service. So the way that I help women with that is I have kind of three core services. And my first is a strategy studio. So that's when we jump on a call together and whatever someone's struggling with, we kind of nut through it together. And I always say, it's like almost all roads lead to marketing, because no matter what you're struggling with, there's generally a way that your marketing can help you improve that struggle. It might not be the entire solution, but it's always a big part of it. Even if it's, I want to increase my prices, but I'm nervous that no one's going to pay my new rate. Well, all that I hear when I hear that is, oh, we just need to communicate your value more clearly through your marketing so people don't question your rate. So that's kind of what I do in a strategy session. It's obviously not just about pricing. It could be you've come to a massive roadblock and you don't know how to show up in your marketing, or perhaps you want to launch a new product or service, but you don't know what that messaging is to tell people about it, or you're doing a business pivot and you're nervous that people aren't going to understand where that pivot came from and it's confusing. So it's a lot of work around messaging. And sometimes it's just a big fat help. And that's just when, honestly, I have a questionnaire that people obviously complete so I can do my research and come in with some insights to offer. But it's just about being there and kind of guiding you through. Like, really, it's a conversation, but a deep and meaty conversation where hopefully you leave with like a new action plan of, okay, this is what I need to do next, and this is what's going to move me forward or get me out of this stuck position. And I'm really upfront. I'm not a report writer, so there's no big 10-page document that comes at the end of it. What I want to come from the end of it is like a clear note list of these are the next 5 or 10 things that I need to do to move my business forward. So that's my strategy session. And then a session that I began to add on, which ironically wasn't part of my business when I started, is copywriting, which sounds ridiculous. I was a journalist. Why did I not offer copywriting? But I don't think originally I realized how great the demand for that was. And what I began to find through all my strategy sessions were people said, excellent. Yes, that means I need to have better copy on my website, or I need a new service guide, or I need a new email nurture campaign to connect with my potential clients once they've downloaded my lead gen. Cool. Can you write that for me? And that's kind of where it started. And I realized that the most value in copywriting is when it has a fast turnaround time, because copywriting is one of those things that can be a long-term project, and then you kind of lose your momentum, and then a month later you get the copy back and you're over it and you've lost the drive to like keep that process moving. So my copywriting is a done in a day service. So a client literally books with me, there'll be a date set in the calendar, and that date is 100% devoted to working on their content, whatever that might be. And I say done in a day, it could be 2 or 3 days. It obviously depends on the size of the project. But the idea of that is that it just has that fast, efficient turnaround time. So you're getting the copy back when you still have the motivation to do something with it. And then the third of my services is a group coaching program, which is really based around accountability and getting momentum in your marketing outside of what I call the norm. I'd say a lot of business owners get to a point where they're like, they've nailed their social media, like they know how to show up on Instagram and do the things. But maybe that's kind of their limit of what they're heavily invested in. And I never like to tell people to go onto a gazillion platforms, because who has the energy or time or resources to actually do that? But I think there becomes a point where we can add something else into our toolbox of marketing. So whether that's improving our SEO, whether that's working on email marketing, whether that's starting to pitch ourselves to be, presenter of an event or give a keynote or be in a podcast, whatever that might be. So my group coaching program is really about just like taking your marketing up a notch and starting to reach out beyond the world of social media, because I always say you need to invest in the real estate you own, and you do not own, and I don't mean own in a yucky way, but you don't own your social media followers. You have no way to continue connecting with them if, something like what is currently happening to Twitter happened to Instagram. If you suddenly didn't have a way to access, or your account got blocked or whatever happened, what would happen to your business? And I never want all those eggs to just be in one basket that's owned by a social media platform. So my group coaching program is really about how do we go beyond that, but also how can we hold one another accountable to actually make those steps happen? So they're kind of my 3 core offerings.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm sitting here grinning because what you said earlier about everything leads to marketing. One of the things that I always say to my clients is like, everybody thinks they have a marketing problem where they really need to figure out their business model first. So we're like 2 sides of the same coin. And then,
yes,
I know a lot of marketing professionals who are like, I wish my clients would do this work first. And anyway, so do you find that you're running up against that, where you have business owners sort of show up in your space and they haven't really defined their business yet?
Yeah. And that's why I call them strategy sessions and not straight marketing strategy. I do say I'm a marketing strategist, but that's really just for being clear about what I do. But honestly, so much of a strategy session is business strategy, because you're 100% correct that marketing is only going to fix it if the foundations are right. If you don't know what your brand stands for, if you don't know your core values, if you don't have systems and processes, there's 1,000 things that need to happen before your marketing will work. And the last thing I want is to give you 10 strategies to go and cater to grow a new email list or something if you don't have the foundations right. So there's definitely occasions where I'll say, look, I can see this is what you need here. That's outside my wheelhouse. Here's some excellent people to speak to, and then come back to me. I never want to, I will bring as much value as I can, but I know where my expertise ends. So, but you're right. There's so often that it's like they're the 2 pieces of the puzzle, right? And if one of them is drastically underserved, it doesn't matter how much you top up the other one. It's just not it can't do all the heavy lifting.
You don't want to throw good money after bad and keep relaying a message that doesn't really work for you. But I think that that's the other piece that that of what you said that I thought was really important, is that a lot of people go out there and they write copy or they build messaging around what they think people want to hear, but it's not really aligned with who they are. And like it ends up being quite vanilla. And I think, when people get their messaging right, it's when they've finally peeled back the layers of what really, and this takes a long time. I'm like 7 or 8 years into this particular business and this iteration of this business. And it's just now that I'm like, I know who I want to work with. I know what's in here. I know what that particular audience is. And it's a scary thing for a lot of people to focus, right? And to start serving an audience that is that particular. But I wonder how you sort of navigate that with your clients and helping them really pull out those things that are so uniquely them.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And I even went through that myself as a business owner. When I started my business, I had built a reputation for myself very much so within the wedding industry. And because people would see me moderating webinars, or I would have met them through industry events and things like that. And I very much initially was like, oh, these are my people. These are the people I need to serve. But when I really drilled down, I have a lot of love and respect for the wedding industry, but I can serve people beyond that industry. But then that for me wasn't a case of, oh, well, I'm just opening the gates to working with everybody. That was kind of the start of my journey to realize who my ideal client is. And I obviously had them originally, but that's one thing I'd really say to people is your ideal client can evolve as your business evolves. And that's okay. Because I think we got so hung up on, this ideal client avatar that all of a sudden when that doesn't feel right anymore, it's almost a bit of an identity crisis. Like, what am I doing wrong? Is my business wrong? It's like, no, your business has just grown. And with that, your ideal client has too. And I think that's to answer your question, often in strategy sessions, I'll say to a client, I'm like, I ask 2 questions. My first one is, tell me about your typical client. And they'll tell me about who they're currently working with. And then I'll say, now tell me who you'd love to work with. And sometimes the answer is the same. And that's when I'm like, winner. Like, you're on the money. You are working with your people. Like, that's fantastic. But if they tell me a different person of like who they aspire to work with, sometimes that even shocks them a little bit. They're like, oh, whoa, yeah, they're really different people, aren't they? And it's not until you put them side by side like that we often kind of have that light bulb moment. And I see that as, yeah, it can be scary, but that is such an amazing opportunity to like hit the pause button for a minute and go, okay, well, what is my message? Maybe my message has evolved a bit as well, or maybe my service offering's evolving. And it can kind of be like, in a good way, a bit of a domino effect of what are all these little micro tweaks we need to make in our businesses to get back into alignment with who we most want to communicate with. And we talk in marketing all the time about pain points, like what is your customer's pain point? But again, that's something that when you've been in your business for a couple of years, it can almost become a little bit stale. Like you become so familiar with what your customers' pain points are that you just go onto a little bit of autopilot. And I often like to, again, hit reset on the pain points, because those evolve too. Like you only have to look at COVID to look at pain points that existed 3 years ago are completely different pain points to a lot of businesses to what they're dealing with now. So I think the whole process needs to be like really malleable. Like you need to be open and willing for and to embrace those changes. The pain points change, your ideal client might change, your service offering might need to change. And that to me is not something negative. That's just an incredible opportunity to get more into alignment with who you most want to serve. And really, that's the kind of soul on fire work, right? That's what gets you excited and gets you back into that zone of, oh yeah, this is right. That's the feeling. That's why I do what I do.
I'm so glad that you are speaking to this, because I think it's one of the things that makes business owners feel like they're doing something wrong all the time, because it's totally natural that your business evolves and grows and matures. It should, right? It must and it should. And if I look back 7 years, I'm just like,
oh, I can look back through your 4 years and cringe. Yeah, exactly.
But it does. And particularly when it's like a personal brand, when it's so much you, because we change too. And I would say, like, I'm 47 now, and I have a very like specific perspective on my life. And as an aging woman, it's like this, you get bombarded with this whole other mindset shift and all of these other perspectives. And so, I'm shifting and pivoting my business to work specifically with women who are not spoken to, who are, the 45 plus, the 40 plus, who are just like not perceived as important or interesting or anything like that. And so that's my perspective, and that's my own kind of passion. And maybe in 5 years it'll be something else. But this expectation that you kind of get somewhere and you stay there, that's like the kiss of death for business, because then you feel like you're always failing. You feel like you are supposed to arrive and you don't arrive. And the reason you don't arrive is because you shouldn't arrive. Like this is this awesome, like malleable, piece of clay that we can continue to. And I think that's fun. I think it's super fun that, I can go into this new phase of my business and I can completely reinvent anything. And that's awesome, right?
I love that you said that.
I can't wait to do it.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I think when I am so often working with clients and they're like, I just feel like I've lost I've lost the energy. Like I feel like all these young people are coming in and starting businesses, and they're cooler on TikTok than me, and they're more comfortable showing up on social media. And it almost like slaps them in the face, like, oh, is my business done? Like, am I expired now? And and I get that. Like I understand the panic that can cause. But again, like exactly as you just said to me, I'm like, oh gosh, no, this is epic opportunity time. Like, let's refocus, rather than the messaging that sometimes we can receive from that social media world that tells us otherwise.
Oh yeah. And you know what, this particular group that I'm moving towards, I mean, they don't give a freak, right? Like they're just like, you know what, let all the TikTokers do their thing. We're like, I'm serious over here. And some of them are amazing on TikTok. Like, let me tell you that too. But they're unafraid. They are like, they don't take shit anymore. They're just like very experienced, very knowledgeable and calm. And so it's just like nobody's speaking to them. So that's where the opportunity lies, but it's also like something I'm very passionate about. So I think that doing the work that you're doing with your clients is almost like good business hygiene. And we should just have the expectation that we check in with our coaches once a year, or that we, re-up once a year, or that we, this is a continuous process. And I think the more we can educate people on that sort of evolution mindset, the better service that we're doing for them.
Absolutely.
So here you are right now with the strategy studio. And I'm curious as to what you see is in the future for you.
Yeah, I think I'm very open to that, to be honest. And I think since I've had my second child, so I have a girl and a boy, and since Jacob was born, that for me was like, again, a bit of another slap in the face to me, like, oh, I need to do things differently. And what worked, I started my business when Lydia was maybe 6 months old, and I had been doing it informally well before she was born, but I think she was the catalyst for me to be like, this is a thing and you need to own it. And I did, and I owned it. And as you would know, businesses need to change when children come along because things just have to work differently. And Jacob was the catalyst for me to say, oh, okay, I need to redesign this, because I absolutely was, as they say, living my best life the way my business operated with one child, but it needed to change. That just didn't work with my second. So the 3 core services that I offer now are not the same 3 core services I had 4 years ago. And to me, that's a great thing. So when I look at what the next thing is for me, I know that I'm reaching capacity, or I'm kind of at capacity now. And I'm okay with being at capacity for a short time, but I need to look at what's next. And I think for me, that's why I'm kind of working more strongly, leaning more strongly now into my group coaching program, so I can serve. They're still very small, like 10 to 12 people at most, but I want to be able to reach more people in the limited time that I have. So I don't at this point have the desire to become an agency. I could hire a team of copywriters. There's absolutely no shortage of that work. But while I have a young family, that's just not a top priority for me. But I'm very open with saying, but that might change. And that's okay too. And I think that I've always said I'm not like a long-term goal setter. I was never that person that would write their 10-year goals down, because for me, and maybe this came back to a journalism thing, but the minute they're on paper, I felt like I was being held to them. Held to by who? Like, it's just me. But that for me always felt, it felt too concrete. And I've always loved the process. I think like I'm passionate about the process. So I enjoy seeing where it goes. So I'm very okay and very open about saying, I don't actually know what that next evolution of my business is, but I know it's about me serving one to many more so than one to one, which is what 80% of my business is at the moment.
Yeah, and I love that. And I just had this conversation earlier today with someone that, when I asked her that question, she said, I don't know. I don't care. I'm happy how I am right now, and I'm open to change, but I'm not trying to make it happen. And that's an unpopular response with a lot of traditional business people, because they're like, no, 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 you have. Now, I do believe that, we don't get anywhere if we don't get really intentional about it and set
Absolutely.
some goals. But do we have to have some vision to build some big thing? No, not at all. I mean, in fact, it's great if we can, this is ideal, right? These little marginal businesses where we can, just kind of exist and have a little bit of control over our lives and supplement our lives with some work that we really love. So some people are really wired to be like, I'm going to build an agency. It's going to be big and I'm going to do all these things and blah, 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 blah. And that's totally fine.
Yeah. And
Totally
I always thought that I was that person. And in my previous career, I really was like, I was, get me up that ladder. Like, let me tick those boxes, like world domination, like, let's go. And then it wasn't everything was cracked up to be. And that's not to say it isn't for other people. Just in the situation that I was in,
Yep.
it wasn't the right one for me. But yeah, I think I like the idea that we get to choose. And I've definitely, since becoming a business owner, become much more of a goal setter, because it's so, even if you don't look at it, there is definitely something in the act of putting it on paper, and in 12 months time, pulling that piece of paper out, and just the intention that you set to be able to go back and look at that and be like, oh, wow. Oh, I launched that program. Oh yeah, I did that. Like, that is so fulfilling. And I've obviously got far more into that now since having my business. But yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It doesn't, if you don't have a 10-year plan, it doesn't mean you're not good at business.
Not at all. And I think, in fact, most planning is fiction. And that's why when we do planning, we focus on 3 months. And, we may have some bigger goals. Like, I know that there's, a far reaching goal for me that I want to be buying and selling businesses. And so what are the things and decisions I can make now to get me closer and closer to that. And
Mhm.
so there's some intention there, but I'm not holding myself to some, some outcome. So I think we can be more gentle with ourselves with the planning process.
Oh, I
And
love that.
yeah, and I think that we could be more gentle with ourselves in marketing too. I see a lot of people really freaking out and like beating themselves up. And I'm like, you need 3 clients. You
Mhm.
don't need 300, right?
Yeah.
And if you want to follow sort of the blogger business model, like go for it. But most of us, like those aren't the same metrics.
Oh,
That's not the
yes.
same like way to measure a business that's like a little micro business personal brand versus something that has, a mass following and you're going to sell digital products, right?
Yeah.
Don't think there's the understanding that there's all these different business models out there. We kind of whitewash and like vanilla our marketing so that everybody thinks they have to do the same thing.
Oh, yes. And I talk so often about what I call ideal world marketing and real world marketing, because there is just so much information out there now telling us that this is how you have to do it. And this is the 5-step plan to have the 7-figure business or to have a 6-figure launch or, all of that marketing talk. And if that's what you're after, like that's excellent. I have zero judgment about that. And I don't know, maybe one day I will be hoping for the 6-figure launch. It's not where I'm at the moment. But just because that messaging is out there and absolutely prolific doesn't mean that's the way you have to do it.
Right.
In my mind, I always say, okay, people will come to me and be like, oh, but I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that. And they'll rattle off all the list of shoulds. I'm like, okay, cool. But that's ideal world marketing. Let's stop being overwhelmed by everything that we think we should do and instead be empowered to do everything that we can based on our own circumstances, our own resources, our own team, our own time, whatever that looks like. And I would get so much more satisfaction out of seeing a small business owner be confident, showing up and nailing their marketing in 2 places rather than trying to spread themselves so thin that they're trying to make dances on TikTok and they're trying to do Instagram lives and they're trying to get onto the next social platform and they're trying to nurture their list and they're trying to pin all their blogs to Pinterest. And don't get me wrong, all those things, ideal world, should happen, but they can't. In most of the clients that I work with, that's not the world that we live in. We're working in nap times and then kids have nap fails and then that day's plan to write a blog just never happened. And that's okay. Like we still run profitable, successful businesses and we succeed. So I just love people to not get so critical on themselves and so harsh on in their own judgment that, oh, I'm not doing all these things that I know I should. But
To
sure.
me, I should means I wish I didn't have to.
Oh,
Right.
yes.
You
I
know,
love that. Oh,
and
yes.
honestly, like I am the most lazy marketer because I know that for me to get the kind of returns I want out of those channels, I would have to do a whole lot more and I don't like it and I don't want to.
Hmm.
So I keep my business going through, 1 or 2 key activities and that's it.
Hmm.
That's it. And like the returns I get from doing all of the extra work on social media or channels are minimal. And so it's like why would I waste my time? So I'll post there when I feel like it and I feel good about it, but there's enough content there already that if someone does find me and they go to check out some of my content, they'll have years and years of
Hmm.
stuff to read if they really want to.
Yeah. And like when I say to people that I'm not on TikTok, they're like, oh, but you're a marketer. I'm like, yeah, I'm a marketer in the real world. And that's
Yeah.
not something I have capacity for.
Yeah.
And I'm okay about it.
And it's also not always aligned. Like I can't
Hmm.
do short form content. I mean, I can sit here and talk for an hour, but try to get me to do something in 15 seconds. It just doesn't, I don't,
Yeah. I
it's
feel
not
you.
valuable. It feels goofy. So that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to say that. Okay. So we're coming up on time, but I have a question that I ask everyone before we finish off. This show is all about being real and down to earth and pragmatic. And what's the difference between what we hear out there in the online business world and what's real?
I love this question. I think the difference is we all have our own definition of success, and we often get distracted by what other people tell us success should look like.
Mhm.
And when we can kind of stay focused on what we want our businesses to look like and how our businesses need to contribute to how the life that we want to lead for ourselves, for our families, with our friends, whatever that might be, that's when we have the opportunity to make really smart decisions. And it's so easy to be distracted by what everyone else is doing. But does what everyone else is doing impact your life and your business? No, it doesn't. So I often tell people to mute, unfollow, whatever you need to do. Anyone that you follow on social media that doesn't make you feel good or makes you feel less than or makes you feel like you should be doing things that you don't want to. I love that expression now. And just really remember why you started your business, because it was probably to design a different lifestyle. And you get to decide what that looks like. No one else. Other people can help you and guide you and help you put the marketing or the systems or the structures in place to make that a reality, but you get to decide.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the empowerment that comes along with it for sure. And, I'm hoping that we all are contributing to new business owners understanding that they can take this slow, that they can breathe, that they can have some space, and that they can do marketing in really, really smart ways that feel really good for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to thank you for taking the time to chat today. Can you tell all of our listeners where they can find you?
Yeah, so I'm most active on my email list and on Instagram, which is The Strategy Studio. And if you follow me at The Strategy Studio, you'll find a link to join my email list. I send out emails every week with, sometimes they're life musing, sometimes they're actionable marketing strategies, but they're always things that are on my mind or things that have come up in strategy sessions with my clients where I think, oh, other people could glean something from this. Let's share it. So that's where you can find me, or thestrategystudio.com.
Great. We'll put all of the links in the show notes so everyone can find you, and go check out some of the great advice and the great tips that Tahnee has for you. And that's a wrap. I'm so happy we had the opportunity to chat with Tahnee today to hear more about how her business came to be, her experiences along the way, and what the future of her business entails. And thank you for tuning into this episode of Real People, Real Business, where we get the real entrepreneurial stories and journeys that you can relate to. The show notes, resources, and links from this episode are available on my website and social media platforms. Thank you again for joining us today. And if you've enjoyed today's content, I would love for you to give us a review on whatever platform you're on to help us share these genuine stories with an even bigger audience. Till next time, keep building, keep dreaming, and keep being real.